It's that time of the year, summer is here, and you want to get into another 2-week Minecraft phase. We have 3 options: buy a server hosting platform, use a free hosting platform, or set up our own server. Since an actual server requires components which we unfortunately don't have, let's take a look at this ThinkPad workstation I bought for less than £200. It has a Xeon CPU, an SSD, and a crap ton of RAM, like worth more than what I bought this laptop for. Incredible deal aside, I think it only makes sense to convert this decade-old laptop into a Minecraft server. Let's take a look. Before we start, let's talk prerequisites: functionality, performance, and thermals. Let's go ahead, check all 3, and then we can commence the server side. The laptop in question is a ThinkPad P51, released in 2017. It was known to be one of the most powerful laptops money could buy, and you needed a lot of it if you wanted the max spec. These were built like tanks, and over the years have held up quite well as versatile mobile workstations. Skip forward to 2026, the P51 is still surprisingly popular, so finding a working unit should provide us plentiful performance. The one we have here is functional, but it has definitely seen better days with scratches, scuffs, and the odd cosmetic issue. Nonetheless, it's quoted to be in working condition, which is all that matters. And by the way, it did come with a 230-watt charger. Turning it on and going into the BIOS reveals to have a Xeon E3-1535M V6, a 4-core 8-thread chip, which was the top spec configuration for this laptop. Anyway, everything looks great with no BIOS keys or compute trace, so it's time to boot into Windows. And there goes my video retention. Don't worry, we will be installing Linux later on. This is just to ensure everything works before we actually set up the server. Everything felt smooth and fluid in Windows 11 with all of the drivers installed. The GPU in the laptop is a Quadro M2200 with 4GB of VRAM and comparable to a GTX 1630. So not the most powerful thing anymore, but back in the day it was more than sufficient. The display is a 15.6-inch 1080p 60Hz IPS panel, which was standard for the P51. There were actually 2 512GB SSDs installed, which the seller completely missed. It also looks like a new battery has been installed. Whether it's a genuine or aftermarket, we'll soon find out, but either way, that's a huge plus. In Cinebench 2026, we managed to score 772 points, which is abysmal, comparable to 4th Gen i7, so I knew something was up. And when I took a look at the temperatures, it was clear that the CPU was thermothrottling, peaking at 100 degrees Celsius. Onto the GPU, running Valley benchmark, we saw some promising results, but once again, those temperatures were just too high. It was definitely a cause for concern, but we managed to pull through with an average just under 60 FPS. Minecraft ran well with a steady average hovering in the mid 100s. The M2200 was never intended to be a gaming GPU, but at least it shows it can play some titles. Since the CPU was clearly overheating and we need it to be at its coolest when running 24/7, I think it's appropriate to give this a little inspection. These ThinkPads were absolute units and thus constructed with the highest grade materials. Taking out the battery reveals it to be an aftermarket, which was expected given a genuine one is highly uneconomical. The RAM and SSD are located underneath this panel, which is held with a couple of screws. Here we have 2 sticks of DDR4 16GB with the other 2 sticks located underneath the keyboard. Of course, we have the 2 512GB SSDs already installed. The other one will be used to later install Linux. Accessing the heatsink requires a full disassembly, starting off by taking out a billion different screws and taking out the keyboard. The other 2 sticks of RAM are located underneath a metal door, and once those are out of the way, the palm rest can come out. Now we can start unscrewing the metal ribcage which holds down the motherboard to the back of the chassis, starting off by disconnecting all the ribbon cables and connectors, then removing the display. After removing countless more screws, we have access to the motherboard. Finally, this is the carnage we're left with. What a nightmare. The heatsink is secured down with a couple of captive screws, and once this is out, we can replace the thermal paste. We could use something standard like Arctic MX4, but since I want the server to be running all day, I went ahead and applied some PTM 7950, which is renowned for its cooling capabilities and longevity. With that completed, time to reassemble everything back together: heatsink, ribcage, display, palm rest, keyboard, RAM, SSD, lots of screws and patience later, it's all complete. Man, my wrist hurts like hell. Anyway, time for the post-disassembly boot. Have I bricked this laptop, or will I be bricked by the satisfaction of the end? Would you look at that? Yeah, let's go. Now that's how you do it. If I were to rank the difficulty of this disassembly, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Just be careful with those ribbon cables. Alright, into Windows, and I once again run a few benchmarks, and wow, those temperatures are considerably lower than before. The CPU has definitely benefited from the PTM, and the Cinebench scores yielded a much more favourable result. I think this was a success and should benefit the server we set up later on, but before we do that, let's give this thing a clean and do a few little repair jobs. With that done, we should be good to go. Time to build a server. There's a whole list of software and tools required for this part, so I'll try to make it as easy to follow as possible. By the way, if you've made it this far, then a like and sub would be highly appreciated. To start off, we need to install Debian, which is a very simple process. All links will be provided below. All it takes is plug in a USB drive with at least 4GB of space, install Balena Etcher, which will be used as a USB mounting software to install the ISO to the USB drive. You can also use Rufus, but you'll soon see why I chose Balena Etcher instead. Once that's done, proceed to the Debian installation page, right click the AM4 link and copy link address. Anyway, go into Balena Etcher and click flash from URL, paste in the URL you just copied, select the USB drive, and a couple of minutes later the USB drive should be ready to use. Nice, we've completed step 1, let's move on to the ThinkPad. Here we have our beloved ThinkPad, which will be put to good use. Let's plug in the USB drive and go into the BIOS. In here, it's important to disable secure boot and set the boot options to both. If you have a BIOS locked ThinkPad, perhaps it's best to stop watching. Since there's no boot drive installed, the ThinkPad will automatically boot into the Debian installer. Choose graphical install and select your country of origin. Now it's time to give the network a name. It can be anything. For mine, I'll put think-server. Same thing applies with the domain name, which I called local. Next, it will give you the option to select the username. You can skip this page by pressing enter and it will give you the option to make an account. You can once again put in anything, but make sure it's memorable. It will ask you again for a new username, which you can keep the same. Next is to set a password, and it is critical that you don't forget this or else you won't be able to access the terminal, so make sure it's secure but memorable. Then wait a few seconds and it should direct you to the disk page. Since we already have a formatted SSD installed, we can proceed with the second option to use the entire disk. Then make sure to select all files in one partition. This will give you an overview of the disk partition, so continue by partitioning and writing to disk. It will then ask for writing changes to disk, select yes and continue. At this point we're nearly done with the installation, so give it a few minutes to install the base OS. Once that's completed, it will ask to configure the popularity contest, choose no and continue. The final step is software selection. Make sure all boxes are unchecked except the SSH server and standard system utilities. Press continue and give it a few minutes to finalize. Press continue once again and let the system reboot. Disconnect the USB drive once the screen goes black so it doesn't boot into the USB again. That's pretty much it. Might look a bit daunting at first, but overall a very easy installation. We should be directed to the terminal automatically. Step 2 is complete. In the terminal, this is where all the magic happens. Here we'll install all proprietary software and ensure the ThinkPad is running optimally. Start off by using your login credentials you made previously to access the terminal line. Depending on what ISO you install, you may want to check if all packages are up to date. So type in sudo apt update to check. Next, we want to access the privilege file within Debian. This is so we can alter the permission to ensure the laptop doesn't turn off when the lid is closed. Type in sudo nano /etc/systemd/logind.conf and press enter. This will bring up a new page. The part we're looking for is handle lid switch. Uncomment both lines and set it to ignore. To save the file and exit, press Ctrl+O, enter, and then Ctrl+X to exit. To check the status, type sudo systemctl status systemd-logind. If it says active running, we should be good to go. Now, when we close the lid, the laptop should stay on. It's time to install the server software. Start off by typing sudo apt install curl. This will be required for Casa OS. This should take a minute installing all required packages. Afterwards, type in curl-fs capital SL https://getcasaos.io and then a pipeline sudo bash, which should fetch the install files. This takes quite a while, but once it's complete, a custom IP will be provided. This is tied to the ThinkPad and can be used to access server-side features on a web browser. That's it, no more command lines. Step 3 is complete. Let's go ahead and check out Casa OS to initialize the Minecraft server. And you meet me on my desktop, and no, I have nothing to hide. To access the Casa OS dashboard, type in your custom IP address. Don't worry, sharing this around won't get you DDoSed. This should bring up a new page on Casa OS, create an account and log in. Once that's done, we have full access to the Casa OS dashboard. Here we can view our system status details, storage information, network status, and access your settings. Enter in your Linux credentials for full access to the server terminal. Now, this part is the most interesting. In Casa OS, we have a full access to different apps you can install and also access your storage drive. There's also an option to mount your drive as network storage, essentially a basic NAS setup. That's all cool, but of course we have a Minecraft server to set up. Go into the App Store and install Crafty controller, which will be used to initiate the server and IP. Once that's completed, go into Files, App Data, Big Bear Crafty, Data, Config, and find the default creds.txt file. This should provide the base login details to access Crafty. If the application doesn't load initially or it says the connection was reset, then go back to your dashboard, then settings, then change the web UI to HTTPS. I'm not sure why this wasn't set automatically, but once that's done, let Crafty initialize and then click on it. You may be presented with a warning, skip it and proceed. Into Crafty, enter in your credentials and we should be in. I'd recommend changing the password so you don't have to copy paste the long string of characters each time. Alright, step 4 is complete, time to start the server. Step 5 should cover the basis of the Minecraft server. On the left side panel, click Servers and create new server. Select Minecraft servers as server type. Server select should give you a range of different options. If you want to install mods, then click on Fabric. Today we're going for Paper, essentially a lightweight vanilla option which should work perfectly with the ThinkPad. Select the latest version of Minecraft and give your server a name. Down below should be an option to allocate memory to your server. Since we have 64GB to spare, I think 12GB should be enough. The server port should be kept as default, but if you're making multiple servers, then increment the number by 1. With that completed, we can let the server rip. To test it, let's go into Minecraft real quick and type in the local IP. Since the port number is set to default, you don't need to type it out, but I did anyway. Give it a few seconds and the server should generate. Minecraft should run fine depending on your internet connection. I experienced no lag or stutter, so I think it went well. Back into Crafty, you can view server statistics such as the number of players joined and the amount of resources used. In player management, you can set yourself as operator and give other players different roles. If you want to alter the server properties, go into Files and find the text file. Here you can set many different features, but the important ones are view distance and maximum players. A server backup is very important, and thankfully Crafty has an inbuilt feature that takes care of that. Click on the edit button to change the backup name, keep the storage location as default, and if you want to keep all backups, leave the number as 0. I'd recommend toggling shutdown server for duration of backup so no inconsistencies occur. You can also set a schedule for backups and how often you want them to be carried out. I think I've shown you enough to get started on Crafty, so let's go ahead to the final step to conclude the server building. So far we've assigned our local server IP to the Minecraft server, which is great, but not if you want others to play. For wider accessibility, we need to set a public custom IP address, and to do that we need to use playit.gg. Click the link down below to download the .jar file from the playit.gg website and import it into the plugin folder. Make sure the server is shut down before doing this, as it will need to run again to download all packages and dependencies. Once complete, run the server again. You can view the terminal to see whether everything is running accordingly. After a few minutes, a unique address will be provided, which is to link your server to a public tunnel. Copy and paste it into your web browser and then you'll be prompted to make an account. Once done, it will then prompt you to claim the agent. Click continue. After a few seconds, the agent setup is complete and you can view the agent. The agent tunnel address should be provided upon setup, but if it isn't, like in my case, then click view agent and go back and it should be there. Copy that, paste it into Minecraft, give it a few seconds, and would you look at that, the custom IP address works and we can finally play Minecraft on our home-built ThinkPad server. There we have it, and their decade-old ThinkPad workstation now lives its remaining life as a Minecraft server, and honestly I think that's an honorary way to go. I acknowledge this part turned into more of a tutorial, but if you enjoyed or found it informative in any way, then go ahead and subscribe. Remember to like, turn on notifications for future videos, continue the support and I'll continue to deliver. So thanks so much for watching, see you in the next one.